This video will be reviewing over the integumentary histology. Specifically, we will be reviewing over the hair and the components of the skin, including the epidermis, dermis, hypodermis, and all of the accessory structures of the integumentary system. On this long section of the skin and hair, there are several structures that are easily identified. So let's review over what you would be held responsible for the lab practical. The first thing we want you to see is we have the hair. Now when we have the hair above the skin layer, that is going to be the shaft. When we have the hair below the skin level, then that will be the root. The sac, and we can see this on both sides, that the hair sits in is called the hair follicle. The little oil glands that are attached to the hair follicle are the sebaceous glands. These are the oil glands. Without these, the hair would grow fungus and have other issues. It would dry and break. We can see the epidermis right here and moving down into the dermis. Here we have a little broader view of the same slide, a long section of the skin and hair. Again, we can see the hair. Above it would be the shaft and below it would be the root. The enlarged area that we have at the tip is the papilla of the bulb. We have the hair follicle on each side. We can see that we are in the dermal area. We have a little sebaceous gland coming off, an oil gland. Here's another little oil gland. So we can see those structures. What we do not see would be away from this area. We would see the sudoriferous glands or the sweat glands, and those are not visible on this particular slide, but do be aware of those for the lab practical purposes. Okay, so again, this is a nice picture showing us the papilla of the bulb, and the papilla is where it's indented in. So we have our root, our hair follicle. Moving over to this other section, we can see the Erector pili muscles. Now these muscles would attach to each of the hair follicles, and if an individual becomes cold, these will become erect, and it causes the hair to fold up and causes the goosebumps. Here we can see it's not a pretty one, but we can see a sudoriferous gland. We can see the epidermis and the dermis. As we review over this slide, one of the things that we will see is the three layers of the integumentary system. Now the first layer that we will review over is right in here. This is the epidermis. Early on in the semester, you learn this as the stratified squamous epithelium. That is the type of tissue that makes this up. And then moving down from this pink all the way down to here, we have the dermis. Now, our epidermis is composed of 5 sublayers called strata, and our dermis is composed of 2 sublayers. We'll have the sublayer that's pushed up, and that's this area here, and that's going to be the dermal papillae. It will be in this area that we will find the receptacles for touch and pain, and those are the Meissner's corpuscle. This area right here down, we would have the reticular layer of the dermis. Now we will go over the strata on our next slide. The third layer is not truly a layer of the integumentary system, but is always discussed with the integumentary system, and that's the hypodermis. And you'll recognize the hypodermis as it is composed of adipose tissue. On this cross-section slide of the integumentary system, looking at the skin, we can see the epidermis, and then we can see the dermis. We may also see the different layers of the epidermis and the different layers of the dermis. Now the sublayers of the epidermis are called strata, and when one is identifying the various strata, we want to use this very similar to a map. And the first structure we want to find is this very dark one cell layer thick line, and that is going to be used as our directions for identifying the 5 strata. This strata is known as the stratum granulosum. And so we always want to find the stratum granulosum, and then we can identify the 2 layers below and the 2 layers that appear above. So we have our stratum granulosum. This thick layer right in here that we see, that is called the stratum spinosum. So we have our stratum granulosum, our stratum spinosum, and then that last layer of cells that's 1 cell layer thick, that is our separation between our epidermis and our dermis. This layer is called the stratum basale. So we have the stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, stratum basale. On thick skin, such as the soles of the feet or the palms of the hands, there will be a 5th layer. And that layer that we see right along in here, and it's kind of a little bit lighter, so we see that light layer, that is the stratum lucidum. And that layer is only on the soles of the feet and the palms of the hand. The rest of the body would only have 4 strata. That last strata is called the stratum corneum. So on all areas of the body, the epidermis is composed of 4 layers: the stratum granulosum, the stratum spinosum, stratum basale, and stratum corneum. On the hands and on the feet, a 5th layer is present called the stratum lucidum, and that appears as this lighter color. With the sublayers of the dermis, and we can see the dermis from here downward, we will have them divided into 2 sublayers. So this indented area is known as the papillary layer of the dermis. It is within this area that we will find Meissner's corpuscle. It is also due to this layer that fingerprints form. And because these ridges are unique for each individual would have unique fingerprints. And this was designed to help with grip. Without this layer, we would not have the ridges on our hand and therefore would have difficulty gripping objects. From here down, we would have the reticular layer of the dermis. So we have our epidermis with our sublayers, the strata, and we have our dermis with our sublayers, the papillary and the reticular. So here we can see a close-up of the epidermis. Again, we want you to always find the stratum granulosum. Below the stratum granulosum, we will have the stratum spinosum, the 1 cell layer that we see that separates the epidermis from the dermis is the stratum basale. Just above the stratum granulosum, that lighter color, is the lucidum, and the stratum lucidum is only on the hands and the soles of the feet. And then we have the stratum corneum. One additional view just to see the difference in staining: stratum granulosum, spinosum, basale. We can see the dermis here. This one right here is missing the lucidum, so it would have the corneum.